Welcome to Exposed and Broken YouTube channel. We uncover the secrets of love, betrayal, and the choices that change everything.
The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the walls settling. Sarah sat alone on the couch, a half-empty glass of wine in her hand. The soft glow of the lamp cast long shadows across the room, amplifying the emptiness she felt. Her husband, David, was working late again, as he often did these days. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a hollow shell. Sarah sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. She couldn't remember the last time David had looked at her the way he used to, with that spark of desire in his eyes. Their marriage had become routine, comfortable, yes, but lacking the passion that had once defined their relationship. She felt invisible, unappreciated, and restless. Tonight, the wine dulled the edges of her discontent, but it couldn't erase it entirely. The doorbell rang, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. She set her glass down and walked to the door, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. When she opened it, Mark, the delivery driver, stood there with a package in his hands. He was young, confident, and had a natural charm that seemed to radiate from him. His smile was easy, his posture relaxed, and his eyes lingered on her just a moment longer than necessary. "Evening, ma'am," he said, handing her the package. His voice was warm, with a hint of playfulness that made Sarah's cheeks flush. "Thank you," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. She noticed the way his eyes flicked over her, taking in the loose dress she wore, the way it clung to her curves. Emboldened by the wine, she smiled. "Long day." Mark chuckled. "Always. But it's not so bad when I get to make deliveries like this." The compliment hung in the air, and Sarah felt a thrill rush through her. It had been so long since someone had looked at her like that, let alone said something so bold. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. "Would you like to come in for a moment?" The words were out of her mouth before she could think them through. She gestured toward the kitchen. "I could use some help with this package." Mark hesitated, his smile faltering for just a moment. Then he nodded. "Sure, why not?" Sarah stepped aside, letting him in. The air between them grew heavier with unspoken desire as he followed her into the kitchen. She placed the package on the counter, her hands trembling slightly. Mark stood close, his presence overwhelming. "So, what do you need help with?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah turned to face him, her heart racing. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. The tension was palpable, the moment teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Just as Mark leaned in, the sound of a door opening shattered the moment. Sarah jumped, her eyes darting toward the living room. Tom, their neighbor, stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of surprise and something else, something knowing. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company," Tom said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Mark stepped back, his face flushing. "I was just helping with a package," he said quickly, his voice tight. Tom's gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment longer before he nodded. "Right? Well, I'll leave you to it." He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The room was silent, the tension now replaced with a heavy sense of guilt and unease. Sarah avoided Mark's eyes, her cheeks burning. "I think you should go," she said softly. Mark nodded, grabbing his things. "Yeah. Of course." He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but then he turned and walked out the door. Sarah stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding. She pressed her hands to the counter, her mind racing. What had she almost done? And what had Tom seen? The questions swirled in her head, leaving her feeling more restless than ever. Sarah stood before her bathroom mirror the next morning, studying her reflection with new eyes. Her thick, wavy hair tumbled past her shoulders, still slightly damp from the shower. the towel wrapped around her curved figure, barely containing her ample breasts. She couldn't help but notice how her body had changed over the years, fuller, more womanly. Her hips were wider, her thighs thicker, creating an hourglass silhouette that she sometimes felt self-conscious about, yet it was these very curves that had drawn Mark's appreciative gaze. Whoa! Please like and subscribe to support Sarah. She traced a finger along her collarbone, remembering how Mark's eyes had lingered there. Her skin was soft, warm-toned, marked here and there with subtle beauty marks that David used to kiss. Her breasts were large and heavy, straining against whatever she wore, a feature Shed sometimes tried to downplay but now found herself thinking about differently. The memory of Mark's presence, so close to her, sent a shiver down her spine. Guilt gnawed at her as she dressed for the day, choosing a blouse that emphasized her curves despite herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she buttoned it up, leaving just enough cleavage visible to be suggestive without being obvious. David barely looked up from his phone when she entered the kitchen, mumbling something about a late meeting that evening. Sarah felt a familiar pang of loneliness, mixed with the lingering excitement from yesterday's encounter. Later that afternoon, Sarah was tending to her front garden, bent over to pull weeds. She was aware of how her jeans hugged her thick thighs and rounded bottom, but she hadn't expected company. Tom's shadow fell across her, and she straightened up, suddenly conscious of how her t-shirt stretched across her chest. "Quite a show you put on yesterday," Tom said, his eyes traveling deliberately down her body. That delivery driver seemed very helpful. His gaze lingered on her breasts, which rose and fell more rapidly as her breathing quickened with anxiety. Sarah crossed her arms over her chest, but this only emphasized her curves more. "I don't know what you think you saw, Tom, but, oh, I saw plenty," he interrupted, stepping closer. "You know, Sarah, I've always admired how generous your figure is. The way you fill out those jeans, how your shirts can barely contain you." His words were both threatening and admiring, making Sarah's cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and unwanted arousal. 3 days later, Sarah was home alone again when the doorbell rang. Her heart leaped when she saw Mark through the peephole. She smoothed down her dress, a flowing summer dress that emphasized her curves while trying to appear casual. When she opened the door, Mark's eyes widened appreciatively. The dress clung to her full breasts and wide hips, the fabric swishing around her thick thighs as she moved. Sarah was acutely aware of how her body responded to his presence, her nipples hardening beneath the thin material, her skin flushing with warmth. Mark's gaze traced the outline of her figure, lingering on the deep valley of her cleavage visible above the neckline. "I have another package for you," he said, his voice husky. Sarah reached for it, and their fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity through her body, making her large breasts heave slightly with her sharp intake of breath. "Mark," she whispered, taking a step back. "We can't." But her body betrayed her, her curves seeming to gravitate toward him of their own accord. He nodded, understanding but clearly reluctant. "I know. But God, Sarah, you're beautiful. The way you look, the way you move." His words trailed off as his eyes traced the outline of her body once more. Sarah felt her resolve weakening. Her body, so often ignored by David, craved Mark's attention. Her full lips parted slightly, her breath coming faster. But the image of David flashed in her mind, and she forced herself to step back. "I should go," Mark said finally, his voice rough with desire. "But Sarah, if you ever change your mind." He left the sentence hanging, his meaning clear. As he turned to leave, Sarah couldn't help but watch him go, her body humming with unfulfilled desire. She closed the door and leaned against it, her curves pressing against the wood. Her large breasts rose and fell with each deep breath as she tried to calm herself. In the silence of her empty house, Sarah was left with the weight of her desires and the growing complexity of her situation. Her body, so full and sensual, felt like both a blessing and a curse, drawing attention she both craved and feared, creating opportunities she both desired and dreaded. Sarah's fingers trembled as she typed the message, "I'm alone tonight. Could use some company?" Her heart pounded as she hit send, knowing she was crossing a line. She stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting the silk robe that barely contained her curves. Her large breasts strained against the delicate fabric, creating a deep valley of cleavage that the robe's V-neck emphasized. The silk clung to her thick thighs and wide hips, highlighting every sensual curve of her body. When Mark arrived 20 minutes later, his eyes darkened at the sight of her. Sarah felt exposed yet powerful, watching his gaze travel over her voluptuous figure. "You shouldn't have texted me," he said roughly, even as he stepped inside. "But God, I'm glad you did." The air crackled between them as Sarah led him to the living room, very aware of how her hips swayed with each step, how her breasts moved beneath the silk. Mark's hands found her waist, pulling her close. Her body melted against his, curves fitting perfectly against his hard frame. His fingers traced the outline of her figure, making her gasp. "You're incredible," he breathed against her neck. So soft, so full. His hands slid lower, gripping her thick thighs through the silk. Sarah moaned softly, her full lips parting. Her breasts heaved with each rapid breath, threatening to spill from the confines of her robe. But as Mark's hands moved to untie her robe, David's face flashed in her mind. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. "Stop," she gasped, pulling away. Her body protested the separation, every curve aching for his touch. We can't do this." Mark stepped back, his frustration evident but his respect winning out. "I understand," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But Sarah, you're driving me crazy. The way you look, the way you feel." "Please," she whispered, clutching her robe closed over her generous curves. "You should go. Please like and subscribe." David sat in his office, unable to focus on the spreadsheets before him. Something was different about Sarah lately, the way she carried herself, the way she dressed. Had noticed how her confidence seemed to have returned, how she'd stopped hiding her curves under baggy clothes. The sight of her full figure moving through their house had started to stir feelings he'd forgotten he had. He remembered when they first met, how captivated he'd been by her beauty, her sensual curves, her confident sexuality. Somewhere along the way, had stopped seeing her, really seeing her. Work had become his mistress, and had taken for granted the passionate, beautiful woman waiting at home. Last night, had watched her getting ready for bed, her voluptuous body moving with unconscious grace. Her breasts, full and heavy, had swayed as she brushed her hair. Her thick thighs and rounded hips had caught his attention as she walked across the room. When had he stopped appreciating these details? When had he become so blind to his wife's allure? Please like and subscribe for Tom. The next afternoon, Sarah was in her garden when Tom's shadow fell across her. She straightened up, adjusting her tank top self-consciously over her large breasts. The summer heat had caused the fabric to cling to her curves, outlining every generous swell and dip of her figure. "Interesting evening you had yesterday," Tom said, his eyes raking over her body. "That delivery boy seems to make a lot of special stops here." His gaze lingered on her cleavage, visible above the tank top's neckline. Wonder what David would think about that? Sarah's blood ran cold, even as her skin flushed under his predatory stare. "What do you want, Tom?" Her voice shook slightly, but she stood her ground, unconsciously drawing herself up to her full height, her curves defiant in their prominence. "What do I want?" Tom stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I want what he almost got. These curves that you've been flaunting around the neighborhood." His eyes traveled down her body again, making her feel naked despite her clothes. "Keep me happy, and David never needs to know about your little delivery man." Sarah felt sick, her body suddenly feeling too exposed, too visible. The curves that had made her feel powerful now made her feel vulnerable. "You're disgusting," she spat, wrapping her arms around herself, which only served to push her breasts up further. Am I? Tom smirked. Am not the one inviting strange men over while my husband's away. He reached out as if to touch her hip, but Sarah stepped back sharply. Think about it, Sarah. You've got until tomorrow to decide. As Tom walked away, Sarah stood frozen in her garden, her curvaceous body trembling with anger and fear. She'd let her physical desires, her need for appreciation of her body, lead her down a dangerous path. Now she was trapped, her voluptuous figure both her power and her prison. She needed to find a way out, but first, she needed to decide what, and who, was truly worth fighting for. Please like and subscribe to support me. I've been deeply affected by infidelity, and your support means the world to me. Watch Exposed and Broken to help me rebuild my life, maybe even buy a house one day. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her heart pounded as she waited for David to come home. She had made up her mind, she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. The weight of her guilt and the fear of losing him had become unbearable. When David walked through the door, his tie loosened and his face weary, Sarah felt a pang of guilt. He looked at her, sensing something was wrong. What's going on? He asked, his voice cautious. We need to talk, Sarah said, her voice trembling. She gestured for him to sit beside her. As he did, she took a deep breath, her full chest rising and falling as she tried to steady herself. David, I've been feeling lonely. For a long time now. David frowned, his brow furrowing. Lonely? Sarah, please, let me finish, she interrupted, her voice breaking. I've felt invisible, like I'm just here, existing, while you're always working or distracted. And I let myself get tempted. There was someone, nothing happened, but it almost did. David's face fell, the color draining from his cheeks. Someone? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. I stopped it before it went too far, but it made me realize how much I miss us, David. How much I miss you. For a long moment, David said nothing. Then he reached out, taking her hands in his. I've been so focused on work, I didn't see what was happening. I didn't see how much I was neglecting you. I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have been there for you. They talked late into the night, laying bare their fears, their desires, and their regrets. For the first time in years, they truly saw each other. Sarah felt a flicker of hope as David promised to make things right, to fight for their marriage. Tom's downfall the next morning, Sarah stood in her garden, waiting for Tom. When he appeared, his smug expression made her blood boil. But this time, she wasn't afraid. We need to talk, she said firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. Her curves were accentuated by the fitted blouse she wore, but this time, she didn't feel vulnerable. She felt powerful. Tom smirked, his eyes raking over her. Changed your mind, have you? No, Sarah said, her voice steady. In fact, I've decided to tell David everything. And if you try to blackmail me or spread lies, I'll make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows exactly what kind of man you are. Tom's smirk faltered. You wouldn't. Try me, Sarah shot back, stepping closer. I'm done letting you intimidate me. You're nothing but a coward, Tom. And if you ever come near me again, I'll make sure you regret it. Tom's face darkened, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched. Sarah watched him go, a sense of empowerment washing over her. She had taken control of her life, and it felt good. A week later, Sarah and David packed their bags and drove to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was David's idea, a chance to reconnect, away from the distractions of work and daily life. The cabin was small but charming, with a roaring fireplace and a view of the forest. Sarah felt a sense of peace as she stood on the porch, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. David came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned into him, her curves fitting perfectly against his body. "I've missed this," David murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "I've missed you." Sarah turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I've missed you too." That night, they rediscovered each other. David's hands roamed over her body, appreciating every curve, every soft line that he had once taken for granted. Sarah felt desired, cherished, and loved in a way she hadn't in years. As they lay tangled together in the glow of the fire, Sarah realized that what she had truly craved wasn't another man, it was the attention and love of the man she had married. And now, she had it. Months had passed since that tumultuous summer, and Sarah found herself standing in front of her mirror again. Her reflection showed the same curves, the same full breasts and thick thighs, but her eyes held a different light now. She smiled, running her hands over her voluptuous figure, no longer seeing it as a source of temptation or shame, but as part of who she was, part of the woman David had fallen in love with. David had changed too. He made a point to come home earlier, to be present. His eyes would light up when she entered a room, appreciating her curves in the way she had always craved. Their love had deepened, strengthened by the storm they had weathered together. "You're beautiful," he would whisper, his hands tracing the soft curves of her body with reverence. And Sarah believed him now, truly believed him. She had learned that real love wasn't about the excitement of forbidden desires, it was about the steady flame of commitment, the warmth of being truly seen and appreciated. Sarah saw Mark one last time, making a delivery to a house down the street. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a small, understanding nod. There was no tension now, no electric charge, just the quiet acknowledgement of a path not taken. She heard later that he had requested a different route, and she was grateful for his respect of her choice. Tom's reputation in the neighborhood had crumbled after Sarah had quietly shared his attempted blackmail with a few trusted neighbors. She didn't need to say much, his true nature revealed itself in time, and other women came forward with similar stories. He kept to himself now, avoiding the judgmental glances of his neighbors. Sarah felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that she had found the strength to stand up to him. On a quiet Sunday evening, Sarah and David sat on their back porch, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Her curves melted perfectly against his side as he held her close, their fingers intertwined. The moment was simple but perfect, no words needed, just the comfort of being together. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on her skin. She thought about how close she had come to throwing this away, how nearly she had destroyed the beautiful life she and David had built together. The temptation that had seemed so powerful now felt hollow compared to the deep, abiding love she shared with her husband. "I love you," David murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every day, I love you more." Sarah squeezed his hand, her heart full. "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for fighting for us." As the last rays of sunlight painted their world in gold, Sarah offered a silent prayer of gratitude. She was thankful for second chances, for the strength to choose what was right over what was easy. She was grateful for her husband's forgiveness, for his willingness to work through their struggles together. Most of all, she was grateful for God's guidance through her darkest moments, for showing her that true happiness wasn't found in forbidden thrills or temporary pleasures, but in the sacred bond she shared with David. Her body, her heart, and her soul belonged right here, with the man who had chosen her, fought for her, and loved her completely. As night settled around them, Sarah whispered a final prayer: "Thank you, God, for this life, for this love, for showing me the way back home. I am grateful for my life and God. Please like and subscribe to support me. I've been deeply affected by infidelity, and your support means the world to me. Watch Exposed and Broken to help me rebuild my life, maybe even buy a house one day."